Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Several people sent me the story when it first appeared on Reddit, but I'm always leery about going with a story off of Reddit because you can't really confirm any of the facts. The stories are often anonymous, and some of them are sensational to the point where you wonder if they're true or not. And so I was waiting to see if this one got borne out with any facts later on, and here we go. The Drive on MSN.com ran the story that Ron sent me. James Gilboy wrote it. Girlfriend sends man's 1967 Chevy Impala project to the junkyard while he's traveling. And again, like I said, the story first started circulating because the guy told the story on Reddit, and he asked the rhetorical question, like basically, am I the bad guy here because I'm upset by what my girlfriend did while I was out of town? And most car guys jumped in and said, dude, you didn't react harshly enough. So here's how it unfolded. A Reddit user learned when he came home from a work trip that his live-in girlfriend, who was apparently jealous of a project that he was working on, had scrapped his 1967 Chevrolet Impala project. So the guy had a 1967 Chevrolet Impala that he'd torn apart in his garage, and apparently his girlfriend wanted to park her car in there, but there was no room in the inn because there was a torn apart car in there. So the Reddit user explained in a lengthy post that he acquired the above Impala sedan in February of 2019, his goal being to restore the car to its former glory. Earlier this year, he and the Chevy moved to a 2-acre property with a 2.5-car garage, which he used the space in which to disassemble the Impala. He put the body in one bay, the frame in the other, and parts were scattered all about the place. Shortly thereafter, his girlfriend moved in and kind of wondered where does she park her car. And that's when the trouble started. His girlfriend insisted on parking in the garage, though she couldn't really get it in there. So he figured, well, I've got 2 acres of land with a lot of nice places to park under shady trees, or even in the barn, if it has to be inside. He told her, in nicer words, he said, that at the time being, she couldn't park her car in the garage. So then he went on a business trip. Here's the quote. When I got back, my girlfriend was all smiles, making me food all the time, doing all the chores, all that. I thought maybe she was just happy to have me home. But then I realized that I didn't see her car in its usual spot. I asked her where she parked so I could make sure I mow that area and keep it clean. She said not to worry, I parked it in the garage. I asked how, and she told me to come check it out. Turns out while I was gone, she hired some people to come over and move everything related to the car, including the drivetrain, body, chassis, all parts, and took it to a local scrapyard. I was dumbfounded. I had spent over $11,000 in that car, including new parts, services, and the car itself. Now, here's the problem that many of you have immediately caught, and that is that even dismantled, this is a car. The car will have a VIN, a vehicle identification number. And when you bring a whole car, whether in parts or not, to a junkyard, they will ask you for the title. Because if you don't have the title, it's a good indication that the car is stolen or something's wrong with it. So you can bet that most states, they regulate junkyards and scrapyards. And they will do inspections and come in and go, do you have titles for all the vehicles in here? And if they don't, they get in trouble. So at least I know they do that in Michigan. Needless to say, he booted her out and immediately sought legal counsel to recover some of what he'd spent on the Impala. He also took security footage to the police to file grand theft auto and grand larceny charges against his ex-girlfriend and began the search for his car, which he quickly found at a local junkyard. The junkyard guys apparently were in the middle of hiding it when the police came to ask them questions, he said. It was on a forklift, and they were going to put it on the top of a pile of cars hidden behind another pile of cars. They said it was theirs and that they had the title, but they didn't, obviously, because he had the title. So the police looked at the VIN on the chassis and the body. It's obviously mine. He said, I know at least one person there has been arrested. I think he was in the camera footage I talked about earlier. They also told me they'd be looking into the specific junkyard for any other vehicles reported stolen. I'm just so glad they found the car. Luckily, I made quite an album of pictures detailing me tearing down the car, so I can use that to prove what parts they had that were mine, so I can hopefully get most or all of it back. Police haven't let me take it back home yet, as they say it as evidence. So hopefully I can get it back eventually. And, that's the problem, is that This will just be more complications, and chances are very, very difficult to get all the parts back because they probably threw some here and that kind of thing. But I can tell you that there are very sketchy scrap yards. And there's problems in many states, and the problems aren't always with cars. The problems are often other things like manhole covers or plumbing, copper tubing, piping, or electrical wiring. And so people will go into old abandoned houses, or sometimes houses that aren't abandoned, and they call themselves scrappers, and they'll go into a house and they'll rip out the plumbing or they'll rip out the wiring. And they often will get 50 or $100 worth of copper and do $1,000 in damage to the house. It's very, very wasteful from a societal viewpoint. And then they'll take this stuff to a scrap yard, and they'll take it to a scrap yard, and the scrap yard will often then pay them. And knowing that there's probably a shady history to it, they'll underpay them because they'll make more money that way, and they know that this person's not going to shop this stuff around. And I know that there are problems in some cities with manhole covers just disappearing. And any scrapyard that would buy a manhole cover from a bum should recognize the manhole cover is probably stolen. Manhole covers get placed in the ground. They're very heavy. And they don't often wear out or, anything like that. And how somebody came into possession of a manhole cover seems like a question they should ask. But of course, if they're buying something by the pound and they're paying under market value for it substantially, they might do it and just hope they don't get caught. So I know that there were some laws in place, put in place in the last few years here in Michigan, but it's tough because that kind of stuff's hard to trace. The thing about cars, though, it depends on the age of the car, but as cars have progressed along, VINs get stamped in more and more places. So there was a time when, in the 1960s, for instance, the VIN might be stamped on the VIN tag on the dashboard near the A pillar, as well as, like, say, on one fender on the inside or a wheel skirt on the inside of the engine compartment, and perhaps someplace near the trunk or inside a rear quarter panel. And nowadays, it's stamped all over the place. It might be stamped on a frame rail underneath the car. And also the engines, if the engine is a matching numbers engine, might have a portion of the VIN stamped into it as well. So for a junkyard to bring, when someone brings in a car to a junkyard and says, hey, here's a car, I want to buy it. If you have a complete car, meaning that the whole thing is there, it doesn't run, but it's there. This fluctuates based on the price of certain metals and so on, but right around $400 to $500 you can get for a complete car. And so it helps if you have the title because that proves that you own it. And I've told the story before. I scrapped my last O2 Explorer. I've got another one right now, but the one I had before that, I scrapped it. It was still running. But it had all kinds of issues. It had finally fallen apart. And I scrapped it, and I called a guy at the scrapyard, and I go, what do you give me for it? And he goes, $500. He goes, it's complete, the engine runs. I go, yeah. He goes, $500. And so I sold it for $500. Now, I could have probably sold it for a little bit more to somebody on a Craigslist, put up with all the hassle. And probably somebody could have driven it for a while longer, as long as they were willing to put up with things like the AC didn't work, the windshield was cracked, things like that. But it ran. Point A to point B all day long. Yeah, absolutely. So I sold it for $500, and the guy took it. But the guy took the title from me, and I signed the title over to him, and we did all the paperwork and all that. And I saw him write the word scrap on the title, and he took it to the scrapyard, and he was the scrapyard. He was the operator of the scrapyard. And so that car is now off the road. But if the state ever came in to audit that guy, and they walked along and said, hey, where'd that O2 Explorer right there, where'd it come from? He goes, oh, I've got the title right here. Bought it from the last owner, the last titled owner. And so I've mentioned before that car dealers keep police books, and junkyards that deal in cars are supposed to keep a similar type of system. It's not quite the same because there's not taxes involved, but the police books with car dealerships have a lot to do with the sales tax that the state gets. But scrapyards that take in cars. So here, the fact that the scrapyard took this car, if in fact this played out exactly as the guy described it, if they took this car without a title, they're breaking the law. And that's the kind of thing that they got to come down hard on, because if they don't, then guys at scrapyards are going to go, hey, wait, I can do this and get away with it? And guess what? There's guys with tow trucks. In the old days, what they would do is they would just drive around and just snag cars off the street. Take it to a scrapyard and go, yeah, got a car for you, $400. Guy at the scrapyard goes, give you $3. Sure. Flips him $300, stolen car, take it back, crush it, take, whatever they do with it. And the car disappears, But it's a bizarre story. And the guy, like I said in the original post, has said, am I the bad guy here? And the internet, in a crowdsourcing moment, wonderfully came together and said, no, you are not in the wrong. She is wrong. Good riddance that you kicked her out. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Don't worry about failures. Worry about the chances you miss when you don't even try.